I'm not going to sit here and just make a bunch of baseless accusations about why it sucks and how could you read this. I'm going to sit here and make a bunch of accusations about why it sucks based on notes I've taken. Ooh, it's a very fancy thing I do. Let's start with the first-person narrative, which is how Twilight is written. The first-person narrative is a very useful tool if you're good at it. Stephenie Meyer is not good at it. The trick to being good with the first-person narrative is being able to show information about a character through their interactions with a secondary character that will allow you to understand who the first-person character is. For example, there is one scene in the biolab where you find out that Bella went to, God, it was so boring I've already forgotten. There it is. Bella was in advanced classes at her high school in Phoenix. This is a nice piece of information to have. And we get that through a conversation she has with her bio teacher. So, ta-da! That's great. But that's about the only time we get any information from Bella from an outside source. Or that is produced from a conversation with an outside source. Everything else we know from her. We know she can cook. We know she falls down a lot. We know she thinks about Edward, does homework. She doesn't understand why she's popular. She likes her big old truck, which I will admit I do have a great deal of affection for. I had a big old truck myself. But the thing is, the list of things I've just said do not make her personality. Cooking is part of her personality. If you like to cook, that is something you enjoy doing. Things you enjoy doing make up your personality. Being unable to look at a tide pool without falling in is not a personality trait. Being clumsy can be something of a personality trait, but the way it's written, Bella should be one of the Three Stooges. During the entire chapter where she's at the beach, there is a page and a half dedicated to her talking about how she loves tide pools and loves to look at them. This is nice. We know that she likes tide pools. However, she then makes a point of telling us over and over again how she falls down into them. I don't know a lot about tide pools. I come from a landlocked state. I haven't been around them a lot. I'm still pretty sure you can stand over one and look in without going face first. So yeah, we don't really have a personality for Bella, and I'm at chapter 7. We also, to be fair, don't have a personality for Edward, which, as a character who is not the narrator, should be easier to come by. Bella could describe him. She could say he's nice, or he's funny, or he's sweet. We know that he's good-looking. It's very generic good-looking, because all she tells us is that he's beautiful, he's dazzling, he's wonderful, he's inhumanly beautiful, and so on and so forth until I chucked up on my shoes. What we don't know is what he likes to do. Why does he have an interest in Bella? None of this is explained. It's supposed to be, I'm sure, very romantic and mysterious, and just comes off as douchey. There is a scene in bio class again, because they have bio together, so of course it's the most important class ever, where Bella has a bad reaction to blood typing, because they're drawing their own blood, and it makes her very nauseous, and she almost faints. Which, now that I think about it, there's something about her we didn't know. Blood makes her nauseous. Not a personality trait, for the record. Just simply just a physical reaction she has to her environment. So she goes to the nurse, and she runs into Edward, who offers to take her home. And when they step out of the nurse's office, she's feeling better, and she walks towards her truck. And then Edward grabs her by the back of the jacket and drags her across the parking lot to his car, and pushes her against the door. I'm not embellishing. This is how it's described in the book. And then, when she considers going to her truck anyway, Edward rolls down the window and threatens her. And again, I'm not embellishing. Threatens is the word that Stephenie Meyer chose to describe how Edward talked to Bella. So let me explain this one more time. A dude she barely knows but she thinks is hot grabs her by the jacket and drags her across a parking lot and pushes her against his car, and then when she thinks about walking over to her car again, he rolls down the window and threatens to drag her back across the parking lot. And that leads me to the whole bad boy thing. Bad boys are not cool, bad boys are not interesting. Bad boys are drug dealers, and they're car thieves, and they're child rapists. And they're armed robbers, and they're violent offenders. And the idea that Edward and Bella's story is being held up as a great love story is really disturbing because they sound like a couple in the midst of the cycle of violence. After Edward saves Bella from the van, he tells her that nobody will believe if she says that he dented up the van with his hands, and she responded, "I know, I wasn't going to tell anyone." He says no one will believe her, and he says it with derision. It's the word used by Meyer again. And she responds with, "I wasn't going to tell anyone." And perhaps I'm overly sensitive, but that sounds like the conversation between a rapist and a victim. No one's going to believe you. I'm not going to tell anyone. Carrying on, I do want to talk actually about 3 characters who could have a lot of good time if they ever used it. Mike, Eric, and Tyler are 3 boys at Bella's school, and all 3 of them ask her to a spring dance, and she turns down all 3 of them because she doesn't like to dance, and that's fine. And afterwards, all 3 boys continue to act in a friendly, non-threatening, perfectly decent manner to her, which she finds weird. Because having boys that want to hang out and still be your friend even though you've turned them down for a date is so creepy, right? I mean, my God, you would think that she's into guys that don't pay her any attention for weeks at a time. Wait. Carrying on. I'm to chapter 7. It's at about a page 75. Let me give you the plot holes that I've come across so far. First of all, they set up in bio class that Bella cannot stand the sight of blood. It makes her sick. She almost faints. 2 chapters before, after she almost gets creamed by the van, she's in the hospital room with the guy who was driving the van, and he's bleeding, and she's okay with it. I don't mean she got a queasy stomach, I mean she didn't react at all. There's no sign that she was queasy or disgusted or about to faint. Secondly, this spring dance that we hear about. She gets invited to the spring dance, just before the van incident. Wait, hold on. Let me check that. You stay put. Okay, I was wrong. The whole dance thing happens after she gets creamed by the van, or almost gets creamed by the van. Sorry, I was really hoping. But my point actually maintains for this plot hole, which is she tells us that the spring dance is 2 weeks away, and then in that chapter goes through a month, and then in the following chapter goes another 2 weeks, and the dance still doesn't happen. A quick bit of skimming tells me that they finally bring up the dance again in chapter 8. Whether or not it's explained why it got this massive postponement, I don't know. But the point is, those are 2 pretty big plot holes, because the whole point of her not going to the dance is that she goes to Seattle with Edward, and I'm sure that's when they'll fall in love and he'll sparkle and, you know, everything gets so romantic. Which can't wait. Yeah. Very quickly, I would like to give a list of books that I recommend instead of Twilight, because I think it's only fair. I said that I thought first-person narrative needed to be done well. In that case, you need to read The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver, which is a first-person narrative that does a very good job of using that old writing adage, show versus tell. Which is that rather than tell us everything about you, it gets shown by the way you interact with other people. Now, that book has no supernatural elements, so, you know, maybe there are people who are reading Twilight for the supernatural elements. May I suggest instead Buffy the Vampire Slayer in comic book form? This is printed by Dark Horse. The first 3 trades are out. You should easily be able to pick it up at your local comic retailer. Or perhaps you like the teenage vibe, you know, a bunch of teenagers hanging out, having a good time. In that case, try Runaways. Runaways. There we go, got it on the second try there. This is printed by Marvel. The first 7 trades are out. Now, this does have superhero elements, not strictly supernatural elements, but there is some magic involved, so that's always a good time. And the spine just busted on mine because I've read it so much. Alright, good to know. But finally, if you're in it because the love story just touches you so much and it makes you feel like a good person, oh, it's such a perfect relationship, you need to be reading A Fine and Private Place by Peter S. Beagle. There we go. And this is actually also a book with supernatural elements. They're ghosts in a cemetery, and they fall in love. And if that doesn't push your supernatural crank, maybe you don't want the supernatural. Maybe you want a substandard book written by a substandard writer and edited by an editor who to give her the benefit of the doubt, probably got drunk as hell when she saw the first draft and just threw darts at deciding what to fix.